For Unit 1. So we're going to skip the vocab since it's covered through the rest of the study guide. Here are the characteristics of life. The first one is cellular organization, simply meaning that all living things have cells, and then those cells are organized into different levels. So cells, tissues, organs, and then finally organ systems. All living things will also grow and develop. They don't grow just by increasing in size, because otherwise a fire grows, a sponge will grow. But instead they grow by cellular division. They have to add new cells or new tissues as they grow. All living things will reproduce. Remember that mules and ligers don't count for this because they have to produce more of their own kind. And since a liger is produced with a lion and a tiger, neither one of those parents has actually produced one of their own kind. All living things are going to respond to stimuli. So that means if your little brother kicks you, you say, ow. Metabolism, all of your energy, so either breaking down food for energy or using that energy for some sort of physical activity. All living things will also maintain homeostasis to keep internally balanced. A lot of people confuse homeostasis with response to stimuli. Homeostasis is different because this is not response to stimuli, your brother kicks you and you say, ow. Homeostasis is your brother kicks you, and to maintain stable internal tissues or blood loss or whatever it is, your body's going to form a bruise to maintain that stable internal condition. Species will adapt over time. I've got a good explanation of it here, but basically they're going to start to look more and more like the survivors. Heredity simply means that you inherit traits from your parents, and that's why I look like my mom. Creatures are not alive if they are missing any of those characteristics. And I've got an example here of a puddle. You could also say fire or quicksand. They are all non-living, but they have a lot of those characteristics of life. Two examples of animal homeostasis. In our minnow lab, he flapped his little gills faster because he was trying to get more oxygen to maintain a steady oxygen level. And your dog would pant to cool down, and that keeps his temperature level. Human homeostasis. Yes, we sweat and we shiver, but we also have to balance our blood sugar. We have to balance out the water levels in our blood. So if we don't have enough, we're going to free extra sugars from our fat. If we have too much sugar, then we're going to pack it away into our liver. If we are dehydrated, we stop sweating. If we are really, really extra hydrated, we're going to sweat freely. We're also going to have very diluted urine. Plant homeostasis, they're going to produce this cuticle, this waxy outer covering, to make sure that they don't lose water if they're in a hot environment. They will also close these things called stomata, these little pores in the plant, to keep them from losing water in a hot environment. Other plants are going to balance out their salt and chemical load. So this is a sweet potato plant actually, and it's been grown in very, very salty soil, and it's going to push all of that salt out through those pores in its leaves as these little salt crystals. And that concentrates all of those chemicals outside of the plant instead of inside. We do the same thing in pine trees when they make sap. Parts of a lab report, you'll notice this is very familiar. This diagram is the exact same one that you had on your station activity. So once again, this is the process. We're going to go more into detail on this in the next couple of steps. So with our variables, independent variable is the one you choose to change because you are an independent person and you get to choose what you want to do. Dependent variable is what happens as a result, and that's what you're going to measure as a response. Controlled variables are things that you don't want to change because they would skew or affect your data in some way. So independent variable, how many Mentos do you want to add to that bottle of Coke? Dependent variable, how high is the explosion going to be after you have that reaction? And then your controlled variables, no matter what, if you add 2 Mentos, 4 Mentos, 8 Mentos, no matter what, you're always going to use Diet Coke. That Coke is always going to be at the same temperature. You're using the same size bottle of Diet Coke. Those will be your control variables. If any of these switched, it would be a different experiment. For example, if you wanted to test the effect of different types of Coke on the height of the explosion. Now, types of Coke would be your independent variable. Quantitative, qualitative, we've covered very, very often in class. Quantitative is results of numbers, so things that you could weigh or measure. Qualitative is things that you can describe but not necessarily assign a number to. Observations and inferences. Observations are things that you can see, facts that you can write down, things that you can measure. Inferences are the assumptions or conclusions that you make based on what you've seen. Here I've got the graph for you. Remember that the independent variable always goes on the x-axis down here, and in this case the independent variable is how long did we make that track. The dependent variable always goes up here on this left side, and that is the time in seconds because that's what changed when we changed the length of the track. All data tables are going to be the effect of independent variable with units on dependent variable with units, so I've got that here. The effect of independent, track event distance, units, meters, on dependent variable, the Olympic Women's Standard Time in seconds. Bar graphs are only used if you have a category that has no number value, otherwise you're going to be using a scatter plot. That would be if you have numbers for IVs and DVs. And then a line graph is only used, you only connect the dots if you're trying to describe the rate of change between two data points. I hope you guys have a good study session and that you are prepared for tomorrow's test.